Hi, I'm Rich Campbell, bass player for America. You're watching ForBassPlayersOnly.com.
Hi, and welcome to ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, founder and first baseman. You know, a lot of people think they're too old or it's too late for them to learn how to play an instrument. So I created ForBassPlayersOnly.com for people over 50 who want to play bass, because I believe you're never too old and it's never too late to experience the joy and the pleasure of making music. ForBassPlayersOnly.com. That's what we're all about. We've got a great guest this week, Rich Campbell. He has been around. He's played with Natalie Cole, Dave Mason, Three Dog Night, Edgar Winter, Stephen Bishop, Andrew Gold. He was tour manager for Ringo and his all-star band for a while. He's quite a prolific film composer. And for the past 20 years, is it? He's been performing with America. Rich Campbell, welcome to ForBassPlayersOnly.com. Great to have you.
Thank you, John. Happy to be here. As the joke goes, I am right now the best bass player in America.
Oh, I bet you get a lot of mileage out of that. I love that.
Yeah, typically. Yeah.
I want to start from the beginning, if we may. I know you're from California originally. You were born there. You took not a direct route to the bass. I know you played some piano, you played some trumpet. So tell me a little bit about your musical upbringing and what ultimately attracted you to the bass.
Well, I didn't have a terribly musical immediate family, but I had a great grandmother, my grandma Lulu, who had an electric guitar and a Kalamazoo amplifier. This is very hip for a great grandmother. But back in the 1940s, during the war, she and her immediate siblings and a couple of friends used to play on KTLA radio, and they would play live because they didn't have pre-record back in those days. And they had kind of a country vibe. They did, as best as it was at that time. They were just introducing this new instrument that a lot of soldiers had been hearing when they're in R&R in Hawaii. That was this real slidey kind of a thing, big old Bakelite slide lap steel guitar that they used to have in their band there. So I used to listen to those kind of stories of what she was doing. And that kind of inspired me a bit to get into it. That and trumpet being my first instrument, was just a big fan of Herb Alpert. I heard the Lonely Bull when that came out, and it was just it kind of captured my attention. That, and just as much, I think, is all the album covers from Herb Alpert. They all had really, hot chicks kind of hitting on him there, and I figured this is my path to getting the girls. Trumpet, right? Well, I didn't know much about that stuff back then, but grammar school was a magic time for that. So. And then I just started playing trumpet. High school, was a composition major in college. That kind of made me play a whole lot other instruments. You have to kind of get a working knowledge of breakpoints and instruments just to kind of make them easier to compose for. So I did quite a bit of that in college, and was paying my way through college playing bass and singing. And was initially going to be in high school, I was planning on going into physics. That was my first sort of love, is just the whole space thing and electronics. I used to build stuff, kits and things in the garage. So, and all that really kind of was a great preparation for my first kind of a foray into a national act. I used to repair things, did a lot of session work when I first moved to LA, but in the electronic end of things. I used to rip apart Lindrums and DMX drum machines and rebuild the filters in them there because they were kind of dull and didn't sound that good. And so I'd rebuild them, and I'd do custom burn EEPROM chips. That was all the rage back in the late 1970s and early 80s. I met a few people that way. And that kind of helped me get into the first national gig I did, which was Natalie Cole's gig. Just prior to her, I worked quite a bit with J.J. Jackson, really sweetheart gentleman of It's All Right fame. And he was just doing clubs around Los Angeles and doing recording work in the afternoons with the fabulous R.I.P. gone too soon, Sonny Burke, the musical director for Smokey Robinson. And that kind of working together, you're working for hours in the studio. You get known as either being kind of a jerk and no one wants to be around you, or a come along guy and you get the job done. And I think that's sort of cemented the reputation for being able to first get the Natalie Cole gig. So, but when I first came on her gig, I was playing bass in backyard parties with, with friends, doing club gigs in the middle of nowhere, just because I would have to pay the bills and enjoy playing bass. I've always, it's been fun being a team player. I never really had the dream to be the star out front. I like kind of just being back there, playing along with everybody else. So, but when I first came on board with Natalie, it was as a tech. I was her monitor engineer, and I was good at programming DX7 keyboards. No one knew what FM synthesis was, and I'd studied that in college. And the samplers were just starting to come out now. The affordable, like the Mirages, and those things were just coming out. And so I was first brought on board because I could do all that stuff. And in the meantime, just kept playing bass on the side, to just out of love at that point there. But about 4 months into the Natalie Cole gig, the bass player on board, Sly Simon was his name. He was also a really sweetheart guy. He got a phone call from his wife. And it was the call that, most of the road musicians always dreaded getting. And his wife said, "You either come home now or I'm divorcing you." So, and lucky for me, he chose love. So the bass player with a show that night, he just said, I gotta go. And we stood around the dressing room. This was at Caesars. We had a couple of weeks that we were doing a run up there in Caesars. And they just kind of kicked around, well, what do we do? What do we do? And I had worked with Eddie Cole. I had worked with Jeff Worrell, the guitar player, that in just other various backyard party kind of situations. And they all kind of just, what do you think? What do you think? Well, how about him? How about Rich? He plays bass and he's seen the show, and we don't have time to rehearse. So why don't we give him a shot? And it was this 15-second pause where Natalie just kind of thought about it. And I'm sure she was kicking around, maybe Nathan East could do it. Maybe, just thinking of all the people who she could get at the last second. And she went, yeah, okay. And the moment she said, okay, I switched from being this tech who played a little bass on the side to being a bass player in a national act. And it kind of never went back after that.
And you beat out Nathan East.
I would. There's a big thing. It's the nanny, isn't it? That he had style, he had flair. He was there. That was basically, I was there. So that was the thing that kind of got me over that hump. But she kept me on board for 4 more years, so I guess I must have done okay.
Was the Natalie Cole gig? It sounds like that might have been the catalyst for the rest of your career. I rattled off a whole bunch of names at the beginning: Three Dog Night, Dave Mason, all of those.
Definitely. And not just the catalyst, but there's also, you have to sort of have the legitimacy behind you of, when an audition comes up, or just even a last minute opportunity that you got to go play it. The Dave Mason gig was that way, where I got a phone call. Can I be in New York in 2 days? Well, sure. What's up? Well, Dave needs a bass player. Okay. Put on headphones on the plane and listen and learn the show on the way to there. How do you do, Mr. Mason? It's nice to meet you. Okay, let's go. Right. There was one of those kind of just play. So, and that the credibility of having that on your resume makes a big difference for people taking your phone call, people actually thinking of you when you get the gig. That was always kind of an epiphany around that time, that it isn't really even so much who you know. It really is who knows you at the right time for getting those kind of gigs, getting the national gigs, getting these bigger ones. So it definitely was the quantum leap into a whole different world for me. From about March was the last gig. March of '89 was the last gig with Natalie. By June, I had heard about, in April, May, somewhere that I don't remember exactly, I heard about that Three Dog Night was looking for bass players. And, and I thought, well, okay, that would be fun. Let's go see if I can do that. And they were looking for just bass players. But I also decided, I'm going to learn the high parts too, and learn the singing parts. Because that's one of those this is a maxim that every bass player should have on their chest, which is just a thing that says a singing bass player never goes hungry. Because somebody needs a singing bass player somewhere, right? That's, if you can play the parts and just a little ooh and an ah, maybe, just sing the little part above the lead singer guy, you're in. So, and then with Three Dog Night, that's essentially what was the plan there. Was I went ahead and learned the parts and just learned them backwards and forwards. I was already a fan, so I had listened to their stuff, when it first came out, also with headphones, picking, all the parts. I used to love Michael Alsop's guitar work. Was just brilliant stuff. He was the orchestra with this Les Paul, it was really just brilliant things. Joe Shermy did some great, fast run things in unexpected places, which was also kind of, just fun to listen to. So it wasn't that hard of a show to learn, but I learned the whole show just backwards and forwards. You could just drop anywhere in the middle of any song. Okay, yeah, I know that. I didn't really practice other things, and I'll show off my riffs that I can play. I just learned their show. and the harmonies that they did. And they went through a day of auditions. They auditioned, I think, 8 or 9 pairs. They were looking for a guitar and a bass at the same time. So I came in with a guitar player who played a bunch of cool stuff. He was a great player. Kind of didn't know their catalog yet, and didn't work out for him. But I came in, played their catalog just because I'd already had it all worked out. I had a couple of weeks to just learn everything. And they said, "Oh, by the way, if let me try the high harmony parts here for you too." So like, I'm singing the high stuff in there. And just at the end of the day, we're kind of sitting around curbside there with Corey Wells out by the sidewalk at down in Van Nuys at a rehearsal hall there, and he just kind of goes, "Yeah, I think you got it." So it was, yes, all right, So it was actually kind of great.
Hey, I wanted to ask you before we get off of Three Dog Night. I saw a video of you playing, and I was listening to the bass, which sounded great. Did you make a nod to American Pie? There's a lick that I heard you play a few to do 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 do, like in American Pie. Was that a coincidence, or did you?
It's being true to the original that way. That's also, I do very little kind of stamping my own thing when I'm doing that kind of a band. So with them, there was, it wasn't a necessarily exact note for note copy, but it was definitely the spirit of what Shermy would do. And he did that kind of stuff. He had busy fills and then back into a really steady groove. That was sort of a pattern that he had. So, and that's kind of what I was borrowing from all that one.
But you bring up an interesting point. I've interviewed 800 bass players. So sometimes I'll ask the question, like with Jason Sheff, who took over for Peter Cetera. How much do you think about his bass lines when you play in Chicago? I interviewed Victor Bailey. What did it feel like stepping into Jocko's shoes for Weather Report? Mike Inez with Alice in Chains. Play like Mike Starr, don't play like Mike Starr. It's interesting. I got some different answers. I mentioned Matt Bissonette. I said, you ever think of Dee Murray when you're playing? And he says, no, Elton is totally cool. He'll just let me, sometimes he'll look at me and smile, or I'll look at him and smile. Bob Lizick playing with Brian Wilson. He says, California Girls, you're not going to mess with that bass. Do 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 do. So it sounds like you're kind of paying homage to your predecessors there.
And the depends on the gig. There on those kind of Three Dog Night gig, there's no reason for me to bring myself into it. But then like the Edgar Winter gig, there's a lot more of a stretch involved with that, with a lot of the songs that we'd played. Same with Dave Mason. Dave has evolved himself over the years, where he had kind of a lighter style. If you remember the old Alone Together stuff there, it wasn't really kind of, it was beautiful and great stuff, and had kind of a nice driving groove to it there. But it was, sad and deep as you, kind of a lighter thing. And he's got sad, and he's got this great voice, has developed so much more. His guitar chops off the charts. He's just plays such great things. So that they're in the whole kind of feeling of the band and the feeling of the shows is no longer trying to be, the record, the album, not trying to be that sound. And that just gives you permission then to go ahead and, to build it as well. Also to do more with it, to bring my own personality into it there. So if the show depends on it, then that's anything goes at that point.
What about your current gig, America? I was trying to think. Was it maybe Joe Osborne or Jerry Schaff? Or who played on those? Or did you know Dan Peake?
I had only met Catherine Peake. I didn't meet Dan before he had passed away in 2011. But their bass players kind of evolved over there. Joe Osborne has done probably the most famous of their bass lines, which is Ventura Highway. I talked to some old high school band teachers that I have, and there's one that he actually gives a course on the bass part in Ventura Highway. It's such an interesting piece of work by Joe. But the guys themselves on the original album, Dan Peake and Jerry would swap off playing bass depending on the song. One would play piano and then Dan would play bass, and so it was them playing quite a bit. And Jerry is for the really interesting kind of the Tin Man, really lyric sort of bass parts and stuff. That's a lot of Jerry in there. So the Horse Don't Know Anything, down, that stuff there. That's Jerry in there. So he has really a great kind of a feel for almost a cello kind of a concept of bass, where it adds an extra line to it. It's not just providing a fundamental. But Ventura Highway, though, with Joe Osborne on there, if you really listen close to that, he's like landing on the major 7 on a downbeat, which a bass never does. but he's doing it in such this lyric moving sort of a way that you don't notice it. It just goes right on by and you think, hey, that was great. And he even does a thing that's just also kind of mind blowing to me is when the song gets to the alligator lives in the air, and it gets to the big payoff with it at the very last end thing there on the air, on the downbeat, he doesn't play, which is, that's when you, right? That's when you're really kicking it in, and he lays out. And the song, and he comes in from real way up on high. This is kind of fall into it there. When you don't pay attention to it, it's just this beautiful, lovely, drives wonderfully. You don't want it to end. It's just such a great thing. But when you really go into the details of what I was doing on that, it's just really amazing stuff.
The band is called America. The guys, I think, are all from America, but isn't there kind of an English connection there?
All three of them, the original founding members there, they have American fathers and British mothers. Because all three of their fathers were in the Air Force and they were stationed in London, in the area there, at one of the bases there. So the three of them, the three sons, went to an American high school in London. And that's where they met. And that's where they put the band together. That's where they got things started. So that's very much an English connection. Their first album they released in England did very well. And then they decided, okay, we need to go stateside. And at that point, we need one more song. And so Dewey comes up with this 2 chords, really simple thing called Horse with No Name, right? Blows up as soon as it hits stateside, it kicks, Neil Young out of the #1 slot on the charts there with his Heart of Gold. So, and they were, off and running after that ever since.
What kind of bass do you play, or basses?
Vector Core 5 right now. So, and that actually, I've been really thrilled with it there. I went looking it was just this practically worldwide mission to looking for a specific bass with 3 things. And it had to have those 3 things. Because at the time we were doing some acoustic trio shows with Jerry and Dewey and myself. We were doing these, just kind of paired down, sitting on stools, shows of America's songs. And in particular, Ventura Highway starts off, and Jerry would play the high note on that, but I would play the second note, so we'd have the 2 parts playing, and that would go F sharp G. So I needed the G string to be 2 full octaves. So it had to have 24 frets. So that was mandatory. But then also I wanted it semi-hollow, partially for my old shoulder. It's a lot easier. It takes a lot of the weight off there. But it's also that most of the stuff was recorded either on a Precision or on a Hofner. There are a lot of Beatle bass stuff that was done in the America stuff. So that tone was also kind of being true to the original. It was always a thing for me. If you're playing with a pick, which some of these songs, you got to play Horse with No Name with a pick. You got it. You can't play it with your fingers. It's just, that would be heresy. So, but when you're playing with a pick, the semi-hollows and the kind of the mellower sounding basses just sound better. They're not so bang, bang, bang. There's more of a really nice developing tone in them. So I went looking for semi-hollow, 24 frets, 5-string, because the 5-string thing I've been playing since Natalie Cole days. I picked up a 5-string from Gibson when we were doing I Live for Your Love, because it had a part in the song where it landed on a low C down below E. And I just couldn't not play that. It almost the song sounded small. If you kept up high, in the C on bass there, you had to go all the way down. So that's when I started playing 5-string, and I kind of never looked back after that. But anyway, so I needed 5-string, semi-hollow, 24 frets. Nobody makes that. And even some of the Italian they have these great sort of boutique basses with that really nobody would make that. You could get them, a Telecaster semi-hollow, you could do those, and they could do them in 5-string, but they don't go 24 frets. They would cut off at 20 or 22 or whatever it was. And I even had asked a couple of custom makers if they could do this. No, we can't get the parts. So, and just found on eBay, I see this Spectre Core bass, semi-hollow. It's got a nice F hole on it there, and it's 24 frets and 5-string, and it was $300 because the preamp was broken. It wasn't making any sound, as they disclosed on eBay, for $300. And I went, I build preamps, right? I'm handy with a soldering gun. Let's see what happened. Ordered it off of eBay, replaced it, grabbed a tantalum capacitor out of a power supply from something else, put it all back together again, worked great. So, and I've actually just kept falling in love with this. It's easy to play, really consistent action from the top to bottom. The tone it just has the single soap bar. Mine has an EMG in it, and I have another one that has a Bartolini. Prefer the EMG. They sound better with a pick. But it has a piezo bridge pickup in it also that I don't use very often. But for the acoustic trio shows, it was kind of nice because you could dial that in and get a little bit of an uprighty kind of a sound because it's that bridge pickup sound. and for some of the emulating an acoustic guitar playing up high, the bridge pickup was kind of good for that. So it just turned out to be this perfect instrument for playing in this band. So, and had since have struck up a relationship with Spectre. They actually been really good to me, fixing things when they need to, setting them back up after they. We did a show in Italy where it was an outdoor show. Rainstorm hit, huge squall, almost knocked over the stage. We just basically was run, right? One of those kind of as the rain was coming. So instruments stayed on a stage, and after all was said and done, I'm pouring water out of the F hole in the instrument, right? Literally dripping water out of this thing here. So and they were really gracious about just kind of setting it back up again, So Spectre's been they've been good to me. So they're good folks there. So Spectre is kind of my go-to at this point here, for the both of them that I play on stage. Consistent tone, soap bar pickup is great for the no buzz issues and that kind of thing. And we play some pretty hostile environments sometimes, and not having to worry about the P-bass buzz is kind of nice, So.
I want to ask you about playing bass and learning bass. For Bass Players Only is an instruction site, and I've got people coming from almost every state in the U.S. and maybe 50 or so countries worldwide coming to For Bass Players Only every day to learn how to play bass. And most of the people are men in their 50s, 60s, 70s. A lot of them are retired. They've always wanted to do this. They're not looking to make a career out of it. They want to get together maybe with their buddies and just play some classic rock riffs or some blues shuffles, maybe a little walking bass. Some of them aren't even interested in getting together with other people. They're perfectly content just learning and playing at home. So I'm just setting up a context for you so you know who we're talking about. And a lot of times, and you said something about your shoulder earlier, when you get to be in your 50s, 60s, 70s, arthritis, tendonitis, those kinds of things. Sometimes people are recovering from surgery. It's not like they're all, infirm or geriatric, but just trying to paint a picture for you. In that context, what advice do you have for somebody like that who wants to learn to play bass? What do you think is important for them to know or to think about?
Yeah, I do think it's a great instrument for us older folks, men and women. I think women kind of are put off a little bit on it because it seems like it would be hard to play. It seems like maybe the action might be hard to play. And in that context there, Mustang basses, smaller basses, make sure that the action is set up low on that. You have your Tao, your incredible women bass players that are out there doing some incredible things. It's just it's great to see that, because it's to me, there's almost, and I hate to say it's sort of a feminine energy to a bass, but there's a cooperative energy, and women seem to be more about the cooperative, the more about, they hang out together and they discuss things together and everything is together. And guys tend to be a little more like driven, like I want to be that guy out front and that. So it's a great team instrument, and for women also. But and for that kind of a thing, though, my suggestions, the things that I do for myself are the lighter instrument. For me, the heavy 5-string jazz bass is just kind of off the table because even the neck is thicker and there's so much weight to it there. An hour into the show, I'm just kind of like, okay, this is going to be a long show, right? So, so the semi-hollows, the Beatle bass type of things, I have an Epiphone viola bass. It's called, but it's, it looks like the Beatle bass hollow. It's not an issue that, you won't get as much sustain or some whatever people kind of say about, hollow basses. They're not the case. It's not relevant in this context of just being able to play and have fun with it. So, but the action is probably the biggest thing for me because I do have a little bit of, the arthritis kicking in. I'm 64 years old. So, and it's about time for this stuff to start catching up with me. But, and if I keep that really light, and Spectres are great for that, keep it very low, as low as it can without having any buzzing issues, and to sort of learn how to get the tone out of the bass by where you pick on the strings rather than how hard you pick on the strings. And that works really well for me with the Spectres, where if actually I want a bitey tone, then you just move closer to the bridge, and you're going to get a lot more harmonic content in the strings. You want a boomier upright thing, just move up, even towards the neck and play from there. Sometimes I'll actually even play literally over the neck. If the tone is to be a very just round, simple, smooth kind of a tone. So, and to get the tone out of that rather than harder, which can kind of give a little more sort of flap if the strings are set really low, you can get a little bit of buzzing on the neck and, that kind of a thing. If you have a bass that's giving you problems, it's worth it. If you can afford to take it in and have it set up by someone who would know how to do that, a little bit of a truss rod adjustment there, a little bit of a bridge height, maybe a new nut in there. can take an instrument that's almost unplayable and just make it a joy to play. So getting the instrument set up is going to save a lot of just agony, especially on the left hand there. It's going to save a lot. If you're not Paul McCartney, I guess that would be his right hand. So, but that's a big part of it for me, for my old self here.
Yeah, we have been getting more women lately. I'm not sure why, but both men and women with the arthritis and the other things that I mentioned, they said medium scale basses or short scale basses, lighter basses, kind of along the lines of what you were saying. That all has been helpful to those people. So if somebody really wants to play, I guess there's a way to do it.
The short scale basses, even on the lower things, are you have the frets are closer together. There's less of a stretch necessary, So, and if there's any kind of, an issue going on with tendons, an issue going on with arthritis, with little inflammation in the joints and stuff, that can really take a lot of the stress out of that too. It can make it a lot more fun and a lot less painful.
What else, if anything, is keeping you busy these days? I know you're doing a tour, but do you have anything else going on? Any other projects or anything else that's keeping you busy?
With America and with a couple of these bands I work with, I'm also tour manager. So with them there. So, and that basically means I have 90 minutes of pure joy on stage and then 23 hours or 22 and a half hours worth of details, booking hotels and logistics, transportation, ground transportation, the video implementation. I do that on stage also. That goes back to my computer hack days. We have this big video thing that goes on during the show, and some of it is legacy images, some of it are logos, just to up the look of the show. And we're using these 14K laser projectors on scrims, 20 feet high, 30 feet wide. And that part of it is kind of an ongoing work in progress there, where the video is updated when songs change in the show, or if I get a bright idea, wouldn't it be great if this was in that song? Okay, then it's up to me to implement and render and then bring it into our hardware that we use.
What would you be if you weren't a bass player? Something outside of music?
It's really hard to say, because I actually did begin early on, all the way up to about the first year in college, to pursue physics. So, and it just seems like that would be something I would have continued on doing. And I use it in my head almost every day when we're setting up things. We studied things in wave propagation in three-dimensional space was a big part of the physics that we did. I had a brilliant high school physics teacher who allowed us to bring a Leslie speaker into the classroom and actually literally measure the Doppler effect. The horn spinning around in there. So it was this applied the physics of the geeky aspects of music into the sciences. So it probably would have been something along those lines. I don't know if it would have been designing gear. I continue to design gear. We have these shields that we use for our drummer that are this hardware that I've just put together, have sort of invented, I guess, although a whole lot of parts were pilfered from other things. So that allow us to have this drum shield that blocks the cymbals but doesn't sit on the floor. And so those kind of things, little inventive sort of things, probably would have been the path that I would have gone on.
Thanks so much for joining us. Good luck with the rest of the tour and everything else, and hope to meet you in person one day soon.
If we're in your town, let me know.
Sounds great.
Tour manager, I got pulled.
There you go. Thank you, Rich Campbell. I'm John Liebman. You're watching ForBassPlayersOnly.com. A lot of people think they're too old or it's too late for them to learn how to play an instrument. So I created ForBassPlayersOnly.com for people over 50 who want to play bass, because I believe you're never too old and it's never too late to experience the joy and the pleasure of making music. ForBassPlayersOnly.com. That's what we're all about. Thanks again to our special guest this week, Rich Campbell. I'm John Liebman, founder and first baseman. I'll see you all next week. In the meantime, let's play bass.